wanted to talk about power, because it seems to me that while we've been going through this time of COVID, that there's a lot been coming up in regards to power, and different power dynamics and the way in which power is kind of being highlighted. Some of this stuff is obviously happening in the States, and some of this is happening in the UK that I've noticed as well. And so this was the list of kind of titles of things that I wanted to speak about with this. So the difference between power over and power to, spiritual ego-based power, the female-male power dynamic, racism and class systems, we're going to have fun today, this creative time where we're in flux at the moment, inner power and intuition, authentic and unapologetic power, and how you feel drained or how you may be leaking power. And then also something that's been coming up recently around education and class systems as well in the UK. So I will explain a little bit about that for those of you who are overseas and not necessarily listening to our news within that. So power isn't a dirty word, but I'm going to give you a dirty word. So if you have little innocent ears around, you might want to kind of like do that or put headphones in or something, because power isn't a dirty word, but we have the impression of power being a dirty word. And that's because the dirty word I want to use is wanker. So we have an incredible fear about becoming a wanker. We're terrified of it, because when we associate power, we think about power as what I would call kind of like that sort of wanker power. And what I mean by that is that kind of like that power over. We don't want power over. So we kind of get in this idea of kind of having power over. And when we're learning about power, we think about our parents having power over us as a kid, or we think about a teacher having power over us, or the police having power over us. But power seems to come from people in authority that takes our level of power away. And there is a very basic human need, which is for equality. So equality is really important to us. We want to feel equal, and we don't mind if somebody necessarily has power over us, but what we want to be absolutely clear on is that our power doesn't get sort of taken away from us, and our rights don't get taken away from us. And that's something that is a fundamental human need, and I can't stress that enough, but the need to feel that things are equal or some kind of equality around that. And so when we think about power over, that's why we naturally hate it, because we want a sense of equality, justice and fairness. So when we look at power over, we kind of see that there are dynamics that are out of our control. However, because we don't want to become a wanker, which is power over, oppressive power, we just seem to refuse to own our own power. And what that means is that we, in the spiritual kind of like discipline in the spiritual world, we talk a lot about being able to empower other people, I want to empower women, or I want to empower, and actually for most of us, we don't even know how to own our own power in order to be able to empower anybody else, because we have this chronic fear of wanker power, which means that we don't embrace the kinds of power that you give, so kind of power to rather than power over. So in order to own your own power, it means that you have got far more capacity to do a job or a role where you feel like you can be empowered in a way, where you can feel that you can empower other people. So it means if we don't own our own power, we don't have that power to give away. And it's a little bit like self-love, really. When you love yourself, you have more capacity to be able to love others, because that boundary is more in place. So when we have the boundaries of fear, where we can tell people to keep away from us, or don't take too much from me, don't ask too much of me, don't need too much from me. This is a way in which we're trying to preserve our life force. And our life force is our power. So power can be used, the word that I'm using here is kind of like coming up in a number of different facets. So let me just be really clear on what I mean. So the power that we own is how we utilize our life force. It's not fake power, based on our position of power, you know, whether or not you are a CEO or a top person in a company, that's all status power. And as we know, due to COVID, it can be taken away from you in the blink of an eye. But real empowerment is like a core kind of, it's like your core element. It's your life force, it's your energy, it's how we create in the world, it's how we show up in the world. It's not based on confidence, which is usually based on some kind of external power related thing, but it's like your internal life force. And I would associate it with self-faith more than confidence, because self-faith, you know, in a sense like a faith in a god or whatever, a faith is just based on something that you know about yourself, that you believe about yourself. So if I was involved in a train wreck, you know, that wouldn't be very nice, but if I was somehow kind of like involved in a train wreck, blood everywhere, and remarkably I was unhurt, but there was a way out of the train, I pretty much know I wouldn't take that open door. I pretty much know that I would spend time helping other people if I was okay. How do I know that? I may want to run screaming. I can be a little squeamish, but I just know that. That's something that I know fundamentally about myself. And I would imagine that there's things that you fundamentally know about yourself. And this knowing is like a life force power, this inner awareness of who you are. And the more we can grow that inner awareness of who we are and our own personal power, the more we can show up from a place of self-love, which means that we're not boundarying, if that's a word, I don't even know, but we're not putting up boundaries from a place of keep the heck away from me, don't ask too much, don't rob me of my power, don't take away my choices, because those are the things that we get really fearful of. So when we're talking about investing in this self-power, a lot of this is about being able to truly listen to your intuition and what you know, so that we're not swayed by the kinds of power of that can be adorned by other people. So what I mean by that is kind of other people's opinions of us, other things that we're reading in this new fake news culture, things that we're picking up from other people. It's an inner guidance system, and that inner guidance system says something to you about how you feel about yourself. So this is who I am, these are my values, this is what matters to me. And from that, in a sense, baseline level, we can then start looking at how we may become a place of powerful influence. Because I don't know about you, but there's something that seems to be emerging in this time of COVID, where we're suddenly starting to see these huge cracks in terms of the authority power, that actually whatever guidance we're being given on what we need to do COVID-wise, or what we need to do for our lives or the economy or one thing or another, that following our own gut instincts about things when some of the scientific experts don't even know, but we sort of, there's an inner guidance that you know about something. So it might be your intuition tells you not to walk into a supermarket when you're suddenly at the door with your bags. It might be that you decide to cross over the street because there's an inner warning system that is telling you to do so. So especially at this time of COVID, that sense of, I don't feel like I want to go here, or this doesn't feel right to me, or this does feel right to me and I'm excited about it, that we start to be able to sort of trust those instincts for ourselves. Because this new emerging of our belief structures in power that we have either voted in or that we believe in, or even the power of doctors or whatever you want to, whatever it is that's happening at the moment, we're starting to see cracks in it. So, I mean, maybe we've always seen the cracks in it, but maybe just been a little bit too lazy to do anything about it up to this point. So some of the cracks in terms of power that's kind of coming up. So we've just gone through this thing in our education system where, so just to fill you in on those of you who haven't been watching the UK news particularly, we've been going through this thing where, I'll just caveat it really quickly, so some details may be really lost, that A-level results for teenagers taking their A-levels, the first thing was that their teachers were to give an assessment of what they thought each student would get if they were to sit their exams. Those assessments were then marked down across the board, but predominantly based on postcodes. So if you came from a deprived area, then you were going to be marked down more than people that were going to private education and private schools. So already off the get-go, when you've got a paid education and a private education, you are already one step ahead of people that perhaps have gone to public schools. And I remember my education, which was, I was told, you'll be lucky to get a job. Very Northern English, but you'll be lucky to get a job out there in the world. Whereas people that I know that went to private schools were told, oh, because you went to Teddy's, because you came to this established school, all doors are open for you. Now, when you step into life, that creates a real psychological impact into how you go and knock on those doors. So if you're privately educated, you might not even bother knocking. You might just go, well, all doors are open to me. I'm just going to try the handle. And lo and behold, the door opens. Whereas if you had a working class background, there's more begging your pardon, knocking on the doors, seeing if anyone will let me in, gives a chance, governor. So we have a different swagger in a way. Now, I've spent a number of years really adopting a middle class archetype. So that's a kind of like a switch from the programming that I might have had in a working class situation to kind of think, actually, what's the difference? And I realised I'd done it successfully when a friend of mine asked me why I was moving to Weston-super-Mare. And I said, it's more me. I used to live here, lots of different reasons. I said, also, the house prices are way cheaper than living in Bristol, which I find to be unaffordable. And he put his head on one side and he went, you give amazing middle class perception. Now, do I think that people who are middle classes are better than working classes? Hell no. That was not why I was giving middle class perception. I was doing it because I wanted to see what the availability or change would be. It definitely changed my clients. It changed an awful lot of job opportunities and things that I was able to do as well. So it's quite interesting, but I wanted to test it to see what would happen. And this doesn't mean that somebody who is working class gives off needs to necessarily give off a vibe of working class, or someone who's middle class even gives off a vibe of middle class, But when we are looking for equality, there are different levels of where our power dynamic can be lessened or gained by how our inner power starts to express itself in the world, which changes how people perceive you. Now, why that is important, apart from the fact that if you want to get paid better in a job, it's a really good thing, it's just saying. But why that is important is because how we, as maybe spiritual thinkers, spiritual people who have been given a programming around ego. So ego can be equated with what I would call wanker power. So, that egotistical blah, 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 that person's got a real ego on them. So there's this sense of not wanting to be egotistical because we associate the ego with wanker power. And that's because a lack of empathy is a very strong characteristic of a psychopath or a narcissist. So unconsciously, when we talk about somebody being wanker power, egotistical power, there is a spectrum that goes from psychopath, narcissist, right the way through to people who are just, playing out programs from a middle class or upper class background, right the way through to people feeling from limiting beliefs, I'm never seen, I'm never noticed, I'm never acknowledged, so I have to fight twice as hard, I have to get ahead, I have to move my way into the world. And that comes from a fakery of needing external power in order to give us some kind of internal validation where we feel that our needs are not going to get met. So there's a massive spectrum of that, what I would call disauthentic power over, not power to. Which means that for those of us who want to empower other people from a spiritual perspective, we are less likely to embrace our ego, which means that people who have huge hearts end up with small voices. And what we end up finding in the world that we're living in is that the power over people are ruling the world, which makes me say the psychopaths are running the world, or the narcissists are running the world. And if you spend any time watching the news and you know anything about psychopaths and narcissists, you can see it. You just need, get yourself your Ron Johnson book, list of 20 psychopathic traits, and you go, it's quite obvious. So this means then, in terms of equality and the shift of power and balance, it feels to me that this, I don't know if we call it a crack, but this opportunity in this period of time of COVID, there is a shift of power dynamic happening, that the people who have the big hearts and the small voices are finding ways to express themselves authentically and step into their own power. We're seeing this within the Black Lives Matter movement. I was on a conference call yesterday, really excellent training called How to Be an Ally. And one of the questions which I asked was, is it possible for Black people to be racist against white people? So you would think it would be, but also, can Black people be racist against each other if they've been given exactly the same level of programming and anti-colour that has been the programming that is across the board? And the answer to that was, yeah, but more the power dynamic makes it irrelevant. It makes it irrelevant because there may be prejudice, but if that prejudice can't be acted upon in a lack of equality kind of way, then it makes it irrelevant, which hadn't really occurred to me and makes utter and complete sense. And that's why I wanted to bring this up within this, because the equality of the uprising of power is coming through the disempowered. It's coming through our educational system in the UK, looking at how we can empower the working classes, because obviously that decision was overturned, by the way. So it's now going to go back to the idea that the teachers are actually going to be giving what the students' merits were based on their coursework and what they had seen of them. So that decision, thankfully, has actually been overturned. But the fact that it was put in there in the first place based on postcodes says something about a lack of equality, and I wouldn't even say it was an unconscious bias, but just a bias. I think that's interesting. The uprising, so there was a class system uprising that has become conscious through the educational system. There was a Black Lives Matter, and All Lives Matter. No, there's another way of calling it, All Black Lives Matter, way of kind of like coming up through that system as well at this time of COVID. And I do not know if you are feeling this, but boy, am I feeling it. That there is a real strong shift towards your own voice and your own creativity and your own form of expression that is coming out at the moment. And some of us have had to go to some painfully dark places inside of ourselves to clean out our own conscious or unconscious bias against ourselves, where we have been kind of like heading down into the bottom drawer of our consciousness and checking out some shit, getting rid of some stuff that has been stored in there that we didn't know about before. And through the freedom of that uncovering of some stuff that may be painful to look at, we have also been stepping into our own authentic power and our own personal power. So it's an exciting time in lots of ways. I know that it feels like we're going to hell in a handbag in lots of other ways, but it's an exciting emerging of individual, authentic, personal power that is going to step you into being a person that can empower other people, but especially empowering yourself. Because we're starting to see that the wanker power has never worked, doesn't work. And why can't we step into a more authentic power that comes from ourselves? It doesn't mean that you becoming more powerful is going to turn you into wanker power. You becoming more powerful doesn't mean that you're going to have this shift, which I think is where perhaps we have gone wrong in that view of spirituality, that we don't want to have that element that backs up against us. Okay, so I talk fast and I talk a lot, and luckily we're recording this. So, but I just wanted to check through some of the things that I was my checklist of things I wanted to talk to you about. So within this is this male-female power as well. In a way, every time you tip a balance, we will always go too far. So in a sense, the female empowerment movement has been something that has ended up disempowering men, and that wasn't great for us. It wasn't great for them. It's been a bit of a thing, for want of a better way of putting it. It's been a bit of a thing. So in a sense, we are different, but our differences are our strengths. So women have different strengths to men have different strengths to women, and we need to be able to celebrate the strengths in each other. And I think that that's where the pendulum swing has gone too far into this man-hating kind of thing, and it's starting to swing back into this, let's value each other's empowerment. Let's actually value that, because I think the female thing became about having power over men in order to create the equality, which doesn't really create equality, if you see what I mean. So the pendulum swing seems to me now that it's coming back into some kind of balance of value. So that's a good thing. Slowly, you might not see it happen overnight, but just in things that I'm sort of sensing and feeling, I think that we're starting to kind of welcome that back into kind of like a hub point. Maybe I need a whole thing to talk about that, because I feel like I feel nervous about going down that rabbit hole, because I have a feeling that this could take another hour or so and I still won't have stopped talking, because that is an entire subject unto itself. So if you want me to talk about that, then do, and also if you've got any questions, put them in the chat. I will come to them, I promise. But I think that, tell me in the chat if you want me to do something specifically on that, because I'm happy to do that, or in comments if you're watching this after the event. So yes, this creative time of flux. That was the other thing. Leaking power. So that's an important point. So, you know what it's like if you've got a moany friend, moany friends, yeah. Or you, when we could, go and visit somebody in hospital, and you come out feeling really drained. Or you have a friend that has these deep conversations with you, and at the end of the conversation they say, "Oh my God, I feel so much better having talked to you." And you feel like you've just had the blood drained from you intravenously, and you're kind of hanging, and feeling really exhausted. People call this energy vampires, but I actually don't believe that we ever have our energy drained from us without our agreement somewhere along the line, that we have either agreed to heal other people with our own life force, or we've agreed to be that person for somebody. So I think that there is a certain amount, conscious or unconscious, where if somebody else is able to drain your energy, that somehow we've allowed that to happen. And there may be many ways in which we allow our energy. I've now interchanged the word power with energy. So let's just change it back to power, because the word power is more uncomfortable than the word energy. We don't like using it. We just don't like it. So when your power is being drained, that's when you are leaking power in ways in which you are unconscious. And if you were conscious, you would not choose to do. And you may feel that in terms of, at the end of the day, you feel, exhausted, or partway through the day, or if there's office work and there's an email and you get this email from this person, and just, you're like, oh God. It's like you can almost tell, I wouldn't want to call it attention seeking, but that sort of, you have invested something of yourself in this communication with this person, that means that even the mere mention of their name makes you feel meh. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. And sometimes the leaking of power can be related to limiting beliefs that we had from childhood. So whenever I talk about limiting beliefs, and they can be, I mean, there's a huge range of them. You know, we all have I'm not enough. We're biologically designed to have I'm not enough. And the reason for that is so that we will fit into the world. So if we fit into the world, because our limbic brain still believes that if we don't fit in, we're going to be kicked out of the cave and die in the cold, mauled by a saber-toothed cat. You know, it has no idea that Sainsbury's and other supermarkets are available. So it tends to believe that we are going to lose our power in the tribe, and we are very conscious of whenever we are not fitting into the tribe, when we may be at, you know, being disapproved of. Now, if you think tribes nowadays may be your village, your small town, but it's very likely to be the people that you work with. So we are super conscious of listening all the time as to whether or not we fit in, we get on. We want to feel like we are in a place of inclusion, and then that comes back to that thing about equality. So our limiting belief of am I enough is because it's an ongoing dialogue that we are constantly asking in any given situation. Our limbic brain is hardwired for it, so that am I good enough, am I enough, is something that we all have. It depends on the spectrum of how strong that voice is in you, and that can be based on a whole load of factors. It can be based on whether or not we feel loved. So when we're in a relationship where we feel loved, we feel that we have more power in the world because we've got somebody who loves us. So if we feel that there is somebody who loves us, then we feel that we have more power in the world. And by feeling that we have that more power in the world, then we feel that we have the capacity and the ability to be more of ourselves, which is a strange thing to say. Like, how can we be more of ourselves if we just feel that we have kind of more sort of power in the world? But that is something that actually happens to us. Helen, I think you've become unmuted. I don't know, but you're nodding, so I'm liking that. Just because I think that you've come on the big screen, on my big screen. My big screen's doing all sorts of stuff. Very weird. So if we feel that we have a sense of a tribe, a set of friends, a relationship partner, something, or work colleagues that we feel that we are connected to and fit in with, that's when we can feel that we have a greater sense of who we are and a greater sense of power. So that makes us feel supported. But we can find that inside of ourselves. That's something that we do have inside of ourselves, that we can have a sense of value and worth and where we come from. So working on those limiting beliefs of I'm not enough. There may be other limiting beliefs that you've got, like I'm not funny enough, I'm not thin enough, I'm not clever enough. And one of mine was definitely around being stupid. And this is because when I was at school, I had 4, maybe even 5 different junior schools. We moved around a lot when I was a kid, so we had lots of different schools. And what that meant was I was standing by the desk talking to the teacher, and he wanted to know what reading book I was on, and he was losing his patience. So he's holding up one reading book. I'm like, no. Another reading book, I'm like, no. Another reading book, I'm like, no. And then this group of kids came in from the special needs group, and I saw that she was reading this book that I'd been reading in my last school. I was like, I'm on that one. And he went, oh, you're one of those. And then immediately put me into the special needs group. Now, of course, I can equate that as an adult as one school reading group to another. But when he said, you're one of those, and I joined that group, and I was really, really bright, and I could tell the difference when I was in that group. But I assumed that I was probably too thick to realise that I belonged in the group. Now, that's a good level of intelligence, to realise that you think you're too thick to know. That's like existential angst in junior school. Really confusing. So that then meant that I stopped trying at school and stopped putting in any effort. Interestingly, that also formed a very delightful chip. I'd like to think it's a French fry now. I have been working on it. But it created a delightful chip on my shoulder that meant that I was really kind of thought, if anyone speaks to me like I'm stupid or treats me like I'm stupid, firstly, my narrative was I would tell everyone I was stupid. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I can't believe I did that. I'm so stupid. So my narrative was that I was stupid. I put that out there into the world. And so I gave people permission to treat me like I was stupid. And so that limiting belief formed an anchor of how the world treated me, which reflected back how I felt about myself. It was a weird set of circumstances. Those of you who may remember Helen Reddy, she sang a song called I Am Woman, Hear Me Roar, which was a huge hit like back in the 60s, part of the female kind of liberation movement. Well, for a chance meeting with her, we were sat talking, and every time I put myself down or called myself stupid, she'd lose her shit. And she said to me, you don't have the right as a woman to speak badly about yourself, because you do down every other woman and you ruin our cause. And I was like, what? Oh, okay. And she would rap my knuckles every time I put myself down. She reprogrammed my head, I would say, in an hour with me, in an hour spending time with me. Her voice, every time I put myself down, I heard her going, you don't get to speak to my friend like that. Until it undid the programming in my mind and I stopped speaking about myself like that. And eventually people stopped speaking about me, to me, or around me like that. But it becomes a trigger point. If anyone does it, I am super aware of it. And this is a way in which I will leak power. So we leak power through these limiting beliefs that show up in the world, where we can become super self-conscious about something that is old triggers and has nothing to do with who we are now. And you will feel when that happens, because the first thing that happens is an energetic spike as you get a dopamine hit from it happening. Instantly created a crash where you feel like you're like it's literally somebody's opened a vein. So that's where we can lose energy and we can feel depleted, because we're letting go of aspects of our power in doing so. So I would become super aware of where you feel that you're losing power. And I hope that I've explained what the feeling is of leaking power and where that leaking power comes from. So when you feel yourself to be leaking power, go into a personal inquiry. When did I just open my life force vein? Why am I letting this kind of come out? And do a little bit of self-inquiry so that you can pull your power back. And the reason why I think it's really important that, especially at this time of COVID, I say this time, this may go on forever, especially at this time of COVID, it's really important not to lose your life force. One, because of your immune system. It really helps boost your immune system to have that life force. Two, because it's miserable. We don't want to be losing our power. It's just miserable. And three, I haven't come up with a three, but I feel it needs a three. So, and three, that's the three. Because we need you to be in your power right now. We need you to be in your authentic power. We need you to be in your level of creativity. We need your voices backing up the movements that are emerging, so that we join some of the movements that are emerging, be that around Black Lives Matter, be that around climate change, be that around class systems, be around, standing up against fake news, be that whatever it is that impassions you at the moment, and be that within your own lives, within your own work, within the way that you support and empower other people, and be that just to use this time, this energy of transformation, to transform your own lives so that you can live your life like you're coming from a really, really powerful place. Okay, right, I've wobbled on for about 40 minutes. So I just want to open that up to anyone who's got any questions. You can unmute yourself and ask questions, or just put them in the chat. I'm more than happy to have that kind of conversation. That's fine. You can message me privately. If you don't want me to use your name, then message me privately. I won't say who you are, and I will answer your question without exposing your name and saying who you are. So That's a number of ways of doing it. So I will look for any of you that have unmuted, either that, or you may all just be going, what on earth have I just been listening to? And any contradictions. I'm also open to contradictions as well, where you go, yeah, you said that right, but I don't think that's right because. So I'm open to that as well. So thoughts, inspirations, over to you. I've fried you, haven't I? I'm so sorry. That's okay. So any thoughts going into the chat? Any questions?
Yeah.
Go, Helen.
So when you've given your power away by, it's not really that, it's more, maybe giving your power away, and then how are you bringing it back in?
I think
you've had that sort of like whoosh thing. How do you then kind of, okay, where did I go then? You know,
you can't get it back from the same place you dropped it. So you can't kind of club someone over the back of the head, go give me it back. So sadly, I mean, you could club someone. Anyway, don't club people. Don't club them. But it's about the things that light you up, the things that light you up, and the things that make you like yourself. So random acts of kindness, that does it for me. I love doing that. Theatre when we could go, but it's finding the things that light you up and make you like yourself. Those are the things, and being conscious that you've done it is kind of like, don't beat yourself up about it, because then that's twice the amount of unpowering you need. So there's the unpowering in the first place, and there's beating yourself up about the unpowering. It's like being unhappy about being unhappy.
Yeah.
So I think it's a case of kind of going, okay, I'm mindful of the fact that I've done that. I'll try not to do that again, but I probably will. And let's work out ways in which I can pull back my energy so that I can go and do the things that bring me joy, that I can go and do the things that make me like myself. Because half the time the things that make you happy don't ultimately make you like who you are. Like I do love eating cake, but it doesn't make me like myself. Whereas before I go for a run, I just no, do not want to go. Then when I come back, I'm like, yeah. And I love myself for it. I love the fact that I got my saggy ass off and went for a run. Yeah. So it's that kind of, it's finding those things that make you center, I know who I am. And also, like yourself for the fact that you gave your power away. Like yourself for having done that. Because the chances are you did it because you're a bloody nice person. You know, you didn't do it because you're an idiot. You did it because you're a bloody nice person. So take that on board. I'm a bloody nice person, but I'd rather be a bloody nice person to myself sometimes and stop putting myself second place. So that's another way of looking at it as well. Does that help, Helen? Is that cool?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Awesome, Midge. Thank you very much. Right, I have had a question in on the chat. This is where my reading needs to sharpen up. Feel like I've been really stressed at work with work overload and feeling like I've got too much going on and I can't cope, and that people tell me that I'm, and people can tell that I'm feeling overwhelmed. Well, that moved. How do I claw myself out of feeling that way? Avoid people having that perception of me. Okay, so when we care, we end up in a situation where when we care about something and we want to get it right, and we care about what other people think about us, and we care about doing a good job, it's way too much care. I know that sounds kind of crazy, but overwhelm comes from care. And care is like a volume. You need to start turning it down sometimes. So there are things, it's like the things that I can control and things that I can't. There's things I need to care about, and there's things that I need to care less about. And there will always be an element of us that wants to feel like we are doing a good job. And that does, and the chances are that your version of a good job is 120% when everyone else is putting in 60. Nobody notices if you go down to 90%. Nobody sees it. Nobody notices. But that withdrawal a little bit of the amount of care that you're putting into things also means you get things done faster, so you can do more work in the time that it takes. It also means that you're not worried quite so much, because a lot of this just comes from the need to get it right, to fit in, to do the right thing. So turning that down in terms of its volume means that you'll turn down that level of overwhelm, because that's usually where it's coming from. Also, where possible, ask for help. Like, where possible, you know, if people are actually seeing that you're in overwhelm, then we just hope that they're not sitting there going, oh, she's not dealing with that so well, is she? That what you want is people to be able to support you, but also within that, don't assume that because they can see you in overwhelm, that they're not just going, well, thank God that's not me. Because most people's perception of other people is based on their own perception of themselves. And we're fairly introspective. And most people kind of like go, well, at least that's not me, rather than actually going, how can I help? Weirdly. So I hope that makes some sense. Cool. Right, I'm just going to go back up because things have been coming in faster than I can move. Thanks. Really like the people with big hearts and small voices description. It really captures this trap that we're stuck in. Yeah, it really does. Thank you for that comment. I like the idea of expanding on the male and female dynamic. I will do that. We will put that on my list. Perfect. This is nourishment for making my day awesome. Oh, I'm so pleased. In other words, my own, superbly captured. Brilliant. Thank you very much for that. That's really lovely. How do I get to know the power that I already have? Oh, good question. Realizing that it is power. I start to realize that I have a good kind of power in many situations without calling or understanding it as power. Could one do a power screening also? Yeah, that's really interesting. So equating power with energy, but also creating power with talent and power with influence. So in a way, if you are, gosh, this is a difficult one. Right, okay, my head's gone into a million places, so just bear with me. Right. Often, we try and create relationship insurance. So what that means, I think I coined that, is if you need me, you won't leave me. So we create relationship insurance by our usefulness in the world. So our power can be based on how useful we are, how needed we are, how, popular, but our power can be created on our power of influence. Now, this is the point when people say power corrupts, because power of influence can start to become a point where we go, oh, I'm needed, I'm wanted, I'm important, therefore I can wield power in terms of getting rewards, be that emotional rewards, people really like me, be that rewards in terms of power over, power to dynamics. So when we have a powerful influence, to quote Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility. That was Spider-Man. So when we have a power of influence, we also have to have a mindful place about how we use it and where we use it. So when we kind of like look at, I know I think I've gone off on one, but I'm coming back. So when we look at what our power is, I would define it as, now we're taking power to another level, I would define it as being love. So now, not your whimsical, wishy-washy kind of exchange love, but your life force love, because I think that your life force is love. So when you're doing something that you love, you feel more life force. So if we look at that in terms of how do I realize where my power is and the good kind of power, it's, do I feel love in this powerful place, in this powerful moment, in this powerful conversation? Do I feel like I'm coming from a place of love? if you feel like you're coming from a place of love and joy, then it's a kind of like a power that in a sense procreates itself. So the relationship, even if it's a collective consciousness relationship where we're giving love indiscriminately in a kind of like a, I'm creating something that, say, a piece of artwork that's going to go in a gallery that people are going to feel emotions towards. You're not going to feel those emotions as an individual, but you would feel them as part of a collective consciousness. And the more love we give into the collective, then the more love comes back to us, the more love we give out. So this is why it's a procreating kind of emotion that we create with our life force. So I guess the best way of answering that question is realizing what your power is realizing that your power is love, and all of the different forms in which we can express love through our work, through our attention, through our time, through all of those things. And that also caveats me back, Helen, about where do we get it back if we've given love that has made us feel depleted. And quite often, you know, a loss of power that has made us feel depleted is when it doesn't come back. And it doesn't have to come back in terms of appreciation, but it also can't be sucked in without, it's not gratitude, but without that sense of movement with it, where it just goes into kind of like a void. And it does come back and it does come around to you, but it goes into that kind of void. I know I feel like what I'm saying sounds contradictory, but it's sort of not. It's still like depleting power comes from what we have decided to make something mean. So if we deplete our power, it's because we've made it mean, oh, that was a waste of energy, or, oh, that didn't work out the way that I want it to. It's because there's been something attached to it that wasn't coming from a pure gift kind of place, that we can feel, this means I'm not good enough, this means I've screwed up, this means it's that bit. Then the best of love intention can become depleted because in hindsight we look at it and put a negative meaning on what happened. If you can spin a positive meaning on it, then you feel more empowered by it, no matter what that empowerment is. If you followed all of that, you're a freaking genius, because that's quite hard to follow. So yay, genius is in the corner, yay. So yeah, so that's a huge thing to kind of like come up with, but hopefully that makes complete sense. So hopefully you've realized what your power is and where it is. And I don't know about power screening, but I just think ultimately it's about that thing that makes you go, woof. I'm sure there's a technical term, I just can't think what it is. Okay, so yes, power is love. Yes, it is. Question coming in: how do I deal with being powerful around authority figures and communicate in an adult to adult way instead of reaching in a child to parent dynamic? So easy to end up doing that, because that's the power dynamic that we were given as a child. So, you know, the teachers at school, your parents, and guess what happens? The boss at work becomes that kind of archetype as well. So that it is quite easy to kind of go into that sort of, and it's really weird. Some people will trigger you into becoming that sort of childlike, sort of teenagery kind of self really easily. And I found myself doing it as well. I think it's because I've never wanted to be a grown-up. I don't see myself as being a grown-up, and I don't know how many of you actually do see yourselves as being a grown-up. But I know I'm an adult, but not a grown-up. Grown-ups are boring. They're just boring. But grown-ups were always these uptight people that seem to have absolutely everything together. And I never wanted to be one of those uptight people who got everything together. So I probably still haven't got everything together. But that grown-up sense. So I would say the way to fix an archetype is with an archetype. So if you're going into a childlike archetype, I mean, obviously there's going to be stuff there that you need to kind of like think, okay, so where is that coming from? But you know me, I don't like digging around too much in the past, because it's what you're making it mean now that is the important thing, not so much what happened to you in your past. So what you can make it mean now is that when you've got authority figures that is your boss or something like that, then you can go, right, so what's the archetype that works well? There is a power dynamic. Your boss has power over you. There's no freaking two ways around it. It's really annoying. I hate it. But your boss does have power over you. And it's about having great leaders who treat their teams as leaders. That's what you really want. But a lot of bosses aren't like that, because middle management is usually squished in two directions. So when you have middle management bosses, they're quite often trying to prove themselves up to a higher level. So they've got their own agenda thing going on. And nobody is taught how to be a middle manager. They're not taught leadership. They're not taught any of those things. So they go into necessarily an old draconian style of power over, rather than empowering leaders within their employees, which is really unfortunate. But if you're stuck with that, it's a real pain. Two ways of doing it. One is archetypally, which is that you work out the best archetypal match. So it might be, if you've got a boss in a particular archetype, that you create the archetype of the creative, or the mad scientist, or the alchemist, or whatever it is that you feel that you need to be. So I have an archetype of a author, because having been in the special needs group at school, if I hadn't created an archetype of an author, I wouldn't have written a book. How crazy is that? But Becky Walsh, without the author archetype, doesn't write books. Yeah, that's weird, isn't it? Becky Walsh, without the teacher or archetype, doesn't do webinars with you guys, because I wouldn't be doing a webinar. So the archetype is the thing. So finding an archetype that will work within that management structure will do it. The other thing is that the chances are your manager is running their own limiting belief, and they have their own imposter syndrome thing going on. And sometimes the thing to do is empower them, find ways to empower them. Thank you so much. That's really smart. Oh, I hadn't seen it like that before. That can go wrong, because if you've got a boss that lowers your self-esteem in order to give the perception that theirs is raising when it isn't, because the only way to raise your own self-esteem is not based on lowering anybody else's self-esteem. But if they're that kind of person, it can be very tricky to empower them in order to create equality, because they may take that power and run with it and still do the power dynamic over you. So try it a little bit. If it feels safe to do so, you'll be the best judge of that. If it isn't safe to do so, then I would say find an archetype. I think that this is why suits are worn in work situations, is to help your power dynamic. Get yourself a really nice jacket and wear it for work every freaking day. It doesn't matter. That's your power dynamic jacket. If it has to have 1980 shoulder pads, do it, But this is how, when we were going through that kind of like, women can do everything that men can do at work, and we have shoulders like them now. That kind of helped with that archetype. Again, the balance went too far, and we've had that conversation. But yeah, so maybe get yourself something. They're back in, by the way, 1980 shoulder pads. I'm just saying, they're back in. Well, I have a jacket like that anyway, so mix it back in. So so you can find a way to be able to increase your power dynamic by doing something like that. Right, we've been chatting for about an hour, so if there's any last question, fantastic, ask it now or forever hold your peace. Otherwise, we should call it a night, and I shall let you, or a day, hang on, depending on your time zone. Sorry, I get excited about that stuff. I shall catch you another time. So any last thoughts, queries? Cool. Well, thank you very much. I shall let you know. Hi, Lucy. I shall let you know. Thank you for the applause. Very grateful. I shall let you know when the next one is next month, and do let me know any themes that you want me to cover. Obviously, I think that the male-female power dynamic, we will look at that, or masculine, feminine roles. So I think that would be a really good one to look at. And thank you so much. And I will catch you all again soon. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Welcome. Bye.
Bye.